Hey everybody, it's great to see you today. Today is June 22nd and we are in the book of Amos. This is Living Power. We're walking through the Bible in a year. We are looking at the 5 visions of the minor prophet Amos today, and this will close out the book for us. It is helpful to have a little bit of commentary on this reading. It is a little bit shorter than yesterday, and today we're just going to focus on Amos, not the part about the kings today, because there's plenty to talk about in Amos. The 5 visions are used to tell Amos what God is going to do to the nation of Israel. And there are 5. The first is the locust, the second the fire, 3 the plumb line, 4 ripe fruit, and 5 the vision that Amos had at the altar. The first 2, notice God relents because the first one, God is going to use the locust to devour the land, and Amos says, no, don't do that. So God relents, and he says, okay. And the second one with the fire, Amos says, no, don't do that. Don't send drought all over and destroy everything. God says, okay. Those 2 show God's patience and mercy. The third one, however, shows that God's long-suffering and his patience is over. He is just over it. And it says, this is the one about the plumb line. God has put out a plumb line and has measured Israel against it, and Israel does not measure up, does not conform to his word, has not acted appropriately as his people. And so what does God say he will do? He's going to tear down their shrines once and for all, and he's going to bring the reign of Jeroboam, the current king, to an end. And basically what that means is he's going to cut off the line in the north, and at some point they're just not going to have any more kings. He's going to put an end to it. God's desire is for Israel to be united, not divided. And so his patience in all these hundreds of years and letting them be 2 separate nations just is another way of his demonstrating his patience and long-suffering with them. As Amos is talking about this, he must be right outside the temple, and Amaziah, the high priest, comes out and says, Amos, you must stop. You need to stop saying these terrible things. Instead of coming out and saying, you have a word from the Lord? What? What is it? What must we do? Even the Ninevites responded like that and turned. But here Israel is telling him to stop and be quiet. Amos replies and says, you're not a true priest. Are you kidding me? You're not a true priest. The issue in this discourse here is, who has authority in Bethel, the king or God? And Amos, a shepherd. A shepherd is the one representing God here in this scenario. And isn't it interesting that God will use anyone that is willing to be a messenger and that is willing to be a vessel? God will use anyone, because Amos said yesterday, you remember, he's just a shepherd. He hasn't been schooled as a prophet. His father wasn't a prophet. God just told him to do this, and he's doing it. So thank goodness for the life of Amos. He is in his obedience to doing what God says or said that he should do. The 4th vision, the ripe fruit. This one's easy to understand, easier perhaps. Israel is ripe for punishment, and it said here that dead bodies will be everywhere. I mean, God is going to do a pretty massive thing here in Israel. And it says, God says, another criticism here, you come to worship on the Sabbath, and you can't wait to leave while you're sitting in the pew to go out and cheat the poor people and go back to living your life the way you've always lived it. The time is coming where you will not hear from me any longer, for I'm going to remove my word from you. And that is in verse 11 of chapter 8. There will be a time of silence where God no longer speaks. And he says, well, you've had my word, and I've been speaking, and you just tell my prophets to be quiet, so why do I need to continue in this? You're not listening. Vision 5, at the altar, God compares the coming judgment to the sifting of grain. And if you think about grain coming through a sieve, it just doesn't have any, it's going to go through, and the chaff or the excess stays at the top, and it's divided. and the grain has nothing to say about it. And in chapter 9, wonderful chapter, I don't want you to miss this part. In chapter 9, verse 11, it starts, the title in our Bible says, A Promise of Restoration. This is really, really important. In verse 8 of chapter 9, God says, I'm going to destroy this sinful nation of Israel. I'm going to destroy it from the face of the earth, but I will never completely destroy the family of Israel. What he's saying is he's going to tear down this kingdom and this establishment and their practice of worshiping these false idols and living this lifestyle. Yes, he's going to kill, I hate to say it, yes, he's going to kill people. People will die as a result of this judgment. And it will be a righteous judgment because God is not only merciful, but he is righteous as a judge. However, he will never completely destroy the family of Israel. There is a promise in this judgment here. And in 9:9 it says, I will give the command and shake Israel along with other nations as grain is shaken in a sieve. That is describing the Great Tribulation, the 7-year period of, and probably the last 3.5 years most in particular. But the 7-year period we're going to talk about hasn't happened yet. It's to come, and they call it eschatology in the end times, where Israel will be judged along with the nations, and that time is coming. So there's kind of twofold a message going on here. Yes, he's speaking to the people of that day. Yes, your exile is coming, and it's going to be as he's described. But he's also talking about a future time, future to them and future to us, that hasn't come yet, where Israel will yet again be judged, and most inclusively at that time in the Great Tribulation for rejecting their Messiah the first time. We'll get to all that. In chapter 9, verse 11, the promise of restoration is here, and I don't want you to miss this because this is the promise of victory. Verse 11, it says, in that day, hasn't come yet, in some day, I believe this is talking about the millennial period, in that day I will restore the fallen house of David. I will repair its damaged walls. From the ruins I will rebuild it and restore its former glory, and Israel will possess what is left of Edom, and all the nations I have called to be mine. Now this was a radical belief right here in 12. All of the nations I have called to be mine. That is talking about you and me. That verse right there is speaking of the Gentiles. God from the beginning of time, even though he called Israel first as a people unto himself, had it in his plan to call all the nations, even the Gentiles, and invite them to be his people. These verses 11 and 12 were actually quoted by James, the brother of Jesus, at the council, the first church council in the city of Jerusalem, which Paul attended back in Acts chapter 15, verse 16 and 17. Paul came to Jerusalem, and they were discussing whether or not Gentiles had to be circumcised. And they came to a decision, and we'll talk about that when we get to Acts. But James quoted this here, saying, even Amos quoted the fact that God would call Gentiles unto themselves, and they can be included in the kingdom of God. So I thought that was very interesting. In verse 13, it talks, and all the way to 15, go back and read this again with an understanding that this is the future restoration of the land of Israel and the people of Israel in the millennial time period, which we have not yet come to. God today is calling a nation, he's calling out of nations a people, the church. This is the church age. When the church is completed, he will return and restore the house of David. He will return to his plan for Israel. See, so we're today in the church age, and we are not yet to Amos 9, verse 11. That comes after the church age is complete. Then he will establish the Jewish kingdom on earth in the millennium and reunite the 12 tribes of Israel. The land will become fruitful, and the people will be blessed. All peoples, all nations will be blessed in the millennium. Here's the application from the lesson today. The entire world, all of the nations, are accountable to God. We see judgment upon Israel and Judah, and we also see judgment upon the Gentile nations. The entire world is accountable to God. Number 2, God hates sin in unbelievers, but he detests it in the lives of the believers. What sin in your life today do you need to take a closer look and recommit to the Lord that you will remove that from your life? Sometimes it's awful hard to see sin in our lives because our sin nature covers it up and hides it from us. And oftentimes, maybe all the time, we need the Holy Spirit through prayer to reveal that to us. So would you pray today asking for the Lord to reveal any area in your life that he wants you to work on or let go or turn away from, whatever it may be? Number 3, we see today that God is love, he is patient and long-suffering, but yet he is just, and he must judge, and he will judge because he is righteous. And number 4, God will make all things right in the millennium. There is a promise of victory then and for now. Here's your question for today. How can you be more concerned for the welfare of others? Not only convicting yourself of your own sin, but how can we remove the blinders from our eyes, being a better noticer of people in need around us? For we do not want the Lord to be able to say these things of us in our life. What a great lesson from the prophet, who really wasn't a prophet, the shepherd, Amos. I hope you've enjoyed this lesson today. I have enjoyed it immensely. Blessings to you and your family. I will see you again next time.